If you get disconnected, reconnect. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Russ Winter. He operates the Winter Watch website, and he comes to us from Czechoslovakia. He's having technical problems. He just dropped off again. However, I will just keep continuing with this conversation. I did an interview with Philip Fairbanks. Philip Fairbanks and I have done a couple interviews. Our original one was about his book, Politics of Pedophilia, and we talked about mind control. He was knowledgeable about that. So I was talking to him. Yeah, you keep dropping off. Keep your mic attached and don't let it fall out of the computer. Anyway, so I was talking to Philip Fairbanks. I did some of my own research, and I came across Winter Watch. And Russ Winter has done a number of articles about a lot of subject. I learned a lot from him, and so I invited him on. And I've come across some of his stuff. He's done some smiley face killer phenomenon type research, and so I know he's talked about that. But we're going to go into some of the kind of darker aspects of the original mind control programs and some of these characters. And you can see on YouTube, you can see the Winter Watch website, and one of these interesting figures was William Joseph Bryan. He keeps popping in and out. Anyway, welcome to everybody. I hope you all had a great Christmas and a great holiday. And so this is probably going to be a very interesting interview considering he keeps popping in and out. But one of the interesting people who I came across is you keep popping in and out. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, it just goes off. It just basically unmutes. I'm not doing it.
Okay. Well, it's either something wrong with your microphone or something. It's something to do with your hardware. Your hardware is either losing connection, you're shaking up the computer or something, because then it loses the connection.
Yeah, I'm trying not to touch it.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
So anyway, one of these articles that I went in that is yours, Russ, is this one titled "William Joseph Bryan, Sirhan's Handler and Setup Maestro Extraordinaire." It's still an important subject because Sirhan is, I think either coming. Okay, there he goes again. Sirhan is still, he's still coming up, I think, for parole. But so it's really fascinating. This guy, William Joseph Bryan, we talked about Jolly and West in the last interview when I was talking with Philip Fairbanks. But this other William Joseph Bryan was somebody who I mentioned, but I couldn't remember his name in the last interview. But he's an interesting character. And he was one of the other kind of guys tinkering around with the brain. And on Russ's website, you can see he was born in 1926 and 1977. And Russ's website is winterwatch.net. So you can see also, he actually does actual real journalism. So you can see all of his articles and all of the stuff that he's put on, not just about mind control subject, but other kind of parapolitical topics and things like that. So I recommend people check this out. But this guy, William Joseph Bryan, was something else because he founded the American Institute of Hypnosis. He was the great grandson of William Jennings Bryan. Can you talk a little bit about William Joseph Bryan, Russ?
Well, he's Johnny on the spot everywhere. I consider him the unsung heavyweight operative in the annals of this mind control. He's a mad genius. The guy lived large. You're hearing me okay?
Yep. Keep talking. You just look. What you need to do, Russ, is look at your screen. Look at your screen, and if it says the devices aren't connected or you get kicked out, that means something went wrong with the.
The problem is I'm kind of going off of my article a little bit, so I can kind of rehash some of the stuff. So I can't really multitask. Just tell me if I'm off, and then I can go back. That's all. I can't tell you if you're off because
I can't tell you if you're off because you'll be off.
Okay, so I'm just gonna have to keep.
You have to look at the box on your side, and if it says you're not connected, that means you fell off.
Yeah, it doesn't say I'm not connected. It just unmutes on me. That's what's happening right now. It looks like it's good. We're good. Maybe we're gonna get through. Okay, so the thing about Bryan, he just shows up everywhere. The guy is just Johnny on the spot to all kinds of incidents. He didn't fare too well in private practice. He set up a hypnotherapy office on Sunset Strip in Hollywood, and uses it to put on symposiums such as successful treatments of sexual disorders. So he was kind of a perv and a freak. And he's quoted as saying, "I enjoy variety and I like to get to know people on a deep emotional level. And one way to get to know people is through intercourse." So he was engaged in malpractice. So the California Board of Medical Examiners found him guilty of unprofessional conduct. But that's actually kind of a qualification for where he's going next, which is, I would say, kind of deep state intel operations, because they loved him. He was found dead in '77 in a Las Vegas hotel room. And he had two Beverly Hills call girls that he claimed to have known Brian intimately, and they spoke out, and they said they'd been servicing him for 4 years, and they were present at the same time, and that he was deeply depressed. He was strung out on drugs, but he was a talker, and so they asked him they titillated his enormous ego, trying to get him to talk about all the famous people he's hypnotized, and if by road, he just went through the role of deprogramming Albert DeSalvo. Albert DeSalvo actually looks like he's turned out to be the Boston Strangler, but he boasted that he had hypnotized Sirhan. The girls didn't sense anything unusual in the Sirhan angle, but for Brian told them many times that he worked for the LAPD on murder cases, but there's no official record of that. But he was on the scene of the police after the hit on RFK Jr. And then one of the girls thought Brian mentioned James Earl Ray. It just goes on and on. Sirhan. He was a. There's also claims that Brian hypnotized and programmed would-be assassin Arthur Brenner to kill George Wallace.
Right.
And there's just a lot of very, very strange stories.
And I think you wrote that Bremer's brother worked at the same horse track as Sirhan, right?
So there's some kind of a tie in there. So he looks like the guy that, I think clearly Sirhan had a handler and was programmed.
Yeah, they called that his supposed handler's name was supposedly Radio Man. So he would on some radio. So they never really knew his name, but that's the same thing with the guy who supposedly shot MLK. Is he had his name? It was Raul. They never found that guy.
Right. So he was a close associate of David Ferry, the JFK plot, and he taught Ferry hypnosis. And Brian, like Ferry, was a member of what's called the Old Catholic Church. And I don't really have you looked into that?
Yes, I'm familiar with that because it was the guy who wrote Sinister Forces talked about that in his Sinister Forces trilogy, Peter Levenda. So I am familiar about this weird order. But it's weird that Brian ties into that because I didn't know that Brian ties into Ferry and all these characters.
Yeah, that's in the book Secret Order by Hal Barley. The citation is page 435. Yeah, Albarelli, page 435.
He just passed away, unfortunately. So there's a lot there. And Brian, one of the things that I learned from your article is that he was a technical advisor for the Manchurian Candidate, which you can see a picture of right there if you're watching on YouTube. You can see the picture, the kind of infamous picture, that one of the greatest scenes, introductory scenes in cinematic history, in my opinion, is the whole, mind control element. But I was shocked. I didn't know that he was. I didn't know that he was a technical advisor until your article. So.
Yeah, he wrote a book called The Chosen Ones: The Art of Jury Selection, basically how to use hypnosis on jury members to win cases. These are just what I say in my article. We're not in Kansas anymore.
Right.
Then he's got on the cover of the book, he's got a picture of a naked man and woman, which kind of throws back to his personality. The guy's kind of a swinger, actually, swinger mentality. And
let me see if I can pull that up on the screen. Let's see if I can do this. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can go to winterwatch.net, but you can see here he is a naked. He was a swinger, but I think that he got busted for having inappropriate things with his clients, but I think that he was known in another story I heard is that he would be around the Sunset Strip area and hypnotize people at bars, women that he liked, and abuse them and put them in altered states. That's not going to stop him in his career, what he was doing, which is a setup guy. Yeah, that probably was just a learning experience for him. Yeah.
So the the kind of in my show notes I have that what happens with these guys is there's a lot of backstories and slides. And you were talking about it in your other interview. I believe that was with Franklin, is his name.
Yeah, no, it's Philip Fairbanks.
Fairbanks, I'm sorry. So what they do is they do like slides or acknowledge minor skullduggery. The stuff kind of comes out, but the thing that's really changed this whole dynamic of mind control is President Reagan promulgated Executive Order 12333 on December 4th, 81, entitled United States Intelligence Activities. And so everybody thinks it's always intel agencies. It's not. A lot of it are these private contractors or private companies, literally. It's a free-for-all, especially since 9/11. And so the executive order reads, agencies within the intelligence community are authorized to enter into contracts or arrangements for the provision of goods or services with private companies or institutions in the United States and need not reveal the sponsorship of such contracts or arrangements for authorized intelligence purposes. So that came out of the church hearings. They quickly set that up, which gave them go-arounds. So now they can say, hey, it's not really our operation. Right. Joe Schmuck over here is doing this. It gives them
plausible deniability, right?
Possible deniability. So you have the story of the Netflix Frank Olson LSD story. That's a slide. That's just designed to get the public to think that, oh, yeah, they messed around with LSD. And by acknowledging it, then they kind of pretend like it all stopped there. The church MK Ultra files, the way I understand it, were all destroyed by Director Helms except for one file. So the whole basis of that investigation was really limited.
Yeah, if you believe that's probably a lie too. I mean, I wouldn't trust the CIA to tell the truth about anything. That's me.
Well, you got this 2 years ago. You had the FBI release what's called the Finders file. I wrote a story up on that. I kind of analyzed the files, went through what was saying, and I would summarize it as essentially they're fessing up to child snatching for undetermined purposes. And that kind of comes out in that file. And I got a lot of reads on that. People were kind of excited about it. But the reality is that that's a side story because there are literally millions of street urchins and orphans available worldwide for these activities. They don't have to snatch suburban kids. They can get them anywhere in the world, and they don't have to do it in the United States. So
that's just like Epstein. Apparently, he had a lot of kids coming from Haiti and Venezuela, super poor countries.
Exactly. And you got Kosovo, so you got kids that are during that 90 period or full-grown adults now. You have Iraq, Haiti, Syria, Central America. These people can be slipped in and placed in the United States over decades. You got 2 million illegals a year. So the point I'm making is this is vast. This mind control stuff is vast. That's kind of my premise. And, I sent you the article on the assassins. Did you take a look at that?
Yeah, I did. Can you talk about the assassin and how that applies to today?
Well, the point I'm making here is that this is nothing new. It goes back 1,000 years to Syria and Persia. And the assassin's recruiting technique would be to procure children from among urchins, war booty, orphanage, and raise them from infancy to become absolutely obedient warriors. And you don't think that they can't do that today? Hell yes, they are.
Oh, there's all kinds of secret programs in the military. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah. So the Ottoman Turks did the same thing. They would kidnap white race Genarian soldiers from the Balkans and the Ukraine. So the same exact template. You got this Don Brown in his book Angels and Demons used a character called Assassin as the Illuminati devoted church sect killer operative in the story. I think that's predictive programming.
Right. I mean, what was the famous line? It's Habib al-Hassan was his name, right? And it was, nothing is true, everything is permitted.
Yes.
I think that was the famous line from back then. And what they would do, they kind of had the primitive kind of mind control. They would take people into what they called paradise provide them with all earthly delights. And then that was before they went out to go kill people. So
yeah, and they did it, and they did it for 2 centuries, and they were kind of hired guns, mercenaries, and they weren't exactly pro-Muslim. They kind of, it's not exactly like they went after the infidels. Instead, they were kind of redirected to go after the established leadership or the established order of the Muslim faith. So they were Discordians. They were disruptive to the Muslim world. They may have been some kind of a tool of Western, so-called Western intel as well.
I think you wrote in your article that they did have successful hits on Crusader leadership, right? They had a couple of them that got killed. So.
Right. Anybody that paid the price for their services. That's how they operated. So, I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with the Kathy Griggs interview.
Yes.
For a long time, I kind of thought that was flaky. I kind of thought, wow, what's this all about? This is really just a little too strange. But what she described is this rabbit hole. So if anybody wants to get a little background on that, I have an article from June 23rd, 2021, winterwatch.net, called "The Ex-Wife of Highly Ranked Colonel Unveils the Deep State and Crime Syndicate." And it kind of describes the same thing. If these people are just friggin' brainwashed and mind controlled and selected selected for certain characteristics. And we've got to read this quote. We got to read this quote from E. Howard Hunt.
Please do.
Okay, E. Howard Hunt, obviously one of the most important intel operatives of this last century. Probably involved, he said he was on the bench with the JFK assassination, and he did the book with his son. And here's what he said. He says, that was how, after the Korean War, I got involved in the CIA. I had been subjected to every known type of drug. The medical doctors connected with the agency found certain drugs worked well in conjunction with hypnosis, the hypnotic power of suggestion, with some subjects. It did with me. I speak with absolute certainty and knowledge and experience that this is not only possible, but did and is taking place today. I never understood why they selected me personally. There were any number of psychological or emotional factors involved in people's selection: antisocial behavior patterns, paranoid, rudiments of paranoia, and so on. But when they are successful with this programming, and for lack of a better term, indoctrination, they can take Joe Doe and get this man to kill George and Jane Smith. Then there is a mental block put on this mission in his mind. He remembers nothing about it. Perhaps a month or two later, rarely over a year, at least back in those days, the phone rings. A code word would be read to him in a voice that Joe Doe recognized. In other words, his handler. This would trigger the action. Joe Doe would commit the assassination, return home, and remember absolutely nothing of it. It's a totally blank space. Now, you could do a lot more than just assassinations. You could have a lot of sleepers out there just carrying out even minor function, minor missions. Who needs the Freemasons when you have this?
Right. I mean, and then you kind of take some of that past stuff all the way up to the Batman Joker shooting that took place in Colorado. Can you talk about that guy and what you think about that?
Well, I would direct people to his psychiatric interview, which I located. And last time I checked, it was still up on YouTube, and I couldn't find it anyplace else. So keeping my fingers crossed that it's still going to last. And people just got to listen to that, because he is so confused and so bewildered. And he even explained right there in court, I'm under mind control.
Wow.
And the guy has just disappeared. Where is the guy? Why is it necessary to hide these people the way they have? They've got him deep sick somewhere.
But what's interesting about, what was his name? Do you recall his name? The Batman, the Joker shooter?
Holmes. Yeah.
Holmes, yeah.
James Holmes.
There's an old, I think you included that video where he is in some type of, neuropsychiatric line of inquiry. Like, I think he studied neurobiology. He's very lucid at some point. Like, he is talking like a graduate level student. And then next thing you know, he's scrambled, bug-eyed. His sister says he just looked at me with his eyes popping out of his head. Like something happened to him.
Yeah, and they find him out in his car drooling after this incident. And who knows what this incident was? I mean, I have real questions about what even happened there. But bottom line, as far as he's concerned, he just happens to be found there on the site. And I think he's a patsy.
Well, isn't that exactly what happened to Sirhan Sirhan? He just
That's
like was
exactly what
standing there.
happened.
Yeah. Didn't even move.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the polka dot girl, and the cup of coffee. Let's go have a cup of coffee. Sirhan takes him down, and she's kind of flirting with this girl. And then next thing you know, they must have dropped something in his drink and gave him the trigger word because he had disappeared for about 3 months. Nobody even knows where he was.
who's Sirhan Sirhan?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. Gosh.
So the other character is kind of builds on this, puts the pieces together on it, is George Estabrooks. Now he's the master of the mind control craft. Now, he estimated, he's one of the granddaddies of it, that 5% of all people were excellent hypnosis candidates. So programs at various levels were pursued. They were looking for assassins. The use of patsies was a common theme. Oswald, the patsy, who knows what kind of mind control he might have been under. Jack Ruby. You have Jolyon West goes and works with Jack Ruby in prison.
Right.
Jolyon
and Jolyon West flat out said this guy is technically insane. Like he came out saying that he was insane, and I covered that in the last interview with Philip Fairbanks. But like the documents are incredible. Like how do you know that fast that this guy's totally insane? Like wow.
That's because that's his job, and he did the same thing with Timothy McVeigh, and Timothy McVeigh was clearly under some kind of a mind control. So it's been going on. They pull these guys in. The patsies is a common theme. Infiltration of targeted governments and key position to control a country. I mean, what a mess the United States is today. You got some really very sketchy, strange people running the show. Where did they come from? A lot of them are foreigners.
Interesting, yeah.
Who's putting them in these positions?
This is one from your article, George Estabrooks, sixth godfather of hypnotic mind control. Quote, we know that dual, even multiple personality can be caused and cured by hypnotism. Moreover, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde combination is a very real one once it is established. The key to creating an effective spy or assassin rests in splitting a man's personality or creating a multiple personality with the aid of hypnotism. It is not science fiction. I have done it.
Right. Yeah, they're looking for multiple personality disorder and what is now termed as dissociative identity disorder. And they have root level programs to find these people, develop the subjects. They can also be created by the therapist. They have all kinds of drugs that they can use. They have isolation. They have abuse. I think they may have been kind of in the early days. We could talk about Rudolph Hess and that story. But in the early days, when Ewan Cameron was involved, a lot of this stuff is just Ewan Cameron. A lot of stuff is just about abuse. So I'm kind of thinking maybe they've got some carrots and sticks going now. That maybe not quite as severe on people, but the condition is created by trauma of some sort. And I'm not privy to the advancement in the technology. That's kind of hard to see. You have to kind of guess, what they're doing today.
Right. But this Ewan Cameron was another bad guy. He was up in Quebec or in Canada somewhere, right? Where he was just psychic. He called it psychically driving. He was literally trying to scrape people's brains free. I think there was a documentary, The Sleep Room or something. Sleep Chamber.
Well, this is back in like in 1943, 45, 46, that period in there. The things that people need to remember is that they were looking for the hard cases to wipe out, and they had all kinds of Axis prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
And those people were used up. They were used up by the Soviet Union. There's a site in Romania called Potesi, where they took Romanian war veterans and legionnaires, Iron Guard, fierce anti-communist, and just tortured them and abused them. And they kind of did that with Rudolf Hess as well, because they had a live one that they could experiment on. And so let me see if I can find this.
All right, but he said, I think you wrote in your article that he thought somebody was messing with him. He had gaps in time and understanding, right? I forgot what it was like.
Well, yeah, he couldn't remember anything.
Right.
And
I've completely lost my
He was
memory.
actually writing letters to his wife. He wrote a very interesting letter to. Yeah, let's see, where is that?
This guy
right
here.
You see the part where he's got a letter that goes out to.
Yeah, I have the letter right here. I've been sitting here for literally several hours. Do you want me to read that?
Yeah, because I'm trying to.
All right, quote, I've been sitting here for literally several hours wondering what I can write to you about, but I could get no further. That I regret to say is for a very special reason. Since sooner or later you will notice it or find out about it, I may as well tell you I've completely lost my memory. The reason for it I do not know. The doctor gave me a lengthy explanation, but I have meanwhile forgotten what it was. And he thought he was being drugged too, or somebody was putting drugs in his food.
Yeah, neurotoxins, and they probably were. I mean, it's funny because there's this big meeting of psychiatrists going over his medical files, and they're all yucking it up and they're laughing. And I'm kind of going, what are you laughing about? This guy actually experienced this. He's not mentally ill. This is what he experienced. And these frigging psychiatrists in this meeting, you just got to listen to it. But they did give a lot of information about what he was being subjected to. And Ewan Cameron showed up, and his predecessor, Reese, his name is Reese, John Reese, big time Tavistock guy, was working over Rudolf Hess. Now read the letter that he wrote to Oswald Mosley. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in prison for 4 years now with lunatics and have been at the mercy of their torture without being able to inform anybody of this. But the worst were the doctors who employed their scientific knowledge for the most refined tortures. So, yeah, they probably were.
He said they were. He said they were Google. They had Google eyes, like spectacles, and he thought they were Jews. Well, they probably were. What a nightmare for a guy like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much there, and you can watch The Sleep Room. I think there's a book called The Sleep Room, and all those people all got settlements. They all got financial settlements for the torture they got inflicted upon by Esther, Ewan Cameron. And
it's amazing to me that after they work over all these Axis prisoners, that he would have the testicles to go up to Ontario and do this stuff on normal people. That's how
they were unwitting. Right, yeah. They were unwitting.
After destroying the lives of these prisoners, which is totally unethical, what they did to these Axis prisoners, and they used a lot of them up. These guys just disappeared off the planet at the hands of these Reese and Ewan. So, let's just take it up and try it on just try our psychic driving and just erase the minds of these civilians.
Yeah, but they were just depressed, or they're having trouble at home or something, and this was the perfect victim.
Now, total experimentation on people.
Yeah, totally unethical.
So there's another story called the Nurut Revelations, and there you have
let's talk about that.
Yeah, you have a commander. This is in 1979. A commander goes up to Stockholm to do a presentation. Lieutenant Commander Nurut, a U.S. Navy psychologist stationed in Naples, the medical center, admitted to a Navy program that created mind-controlled assassins. Narrett made this apparent gaffe at a NATO conference for psychologists in Oslo, Norway. Yes, it was Oslo, not Stockholm. And there's a newspaper story that came out. And he said there's no shortage of enlisted men who could be studied, and the psych profiles and background were available in all subjects. Afterward, a small group that included Peter Watson of the London Sunday Times, Narrett was even more candid. So, they tried to disprove this guy and say, well, he was having some kind of psychological problems and gaslighted him, in other words. But he's talking about very real things that are going on.
Right.
And so the commandos, undercover operatives at U.S. embassies, hitmen, assassins, he revealed the subjects are desensitized while being strapped into a chair with their heads immobilized and eyelids clamped open, kind of like, right out of Clockwork Orange.
Right.
And are forced to view splatter flicks until they were totally callous towards carnage. And that he said that the successful programming of these selected assassins, if you select them right, can happen in a few weeks. And so that kind of came out in 1979. Candidates for assassination training were taken from submarine crews and paratroopers. Another source were soldiers that had been awarded for bravery. They sometimes took convicted murderers from military prisons were excellent candidates. Just a story that is out there. People can, they try to deny it, but why would he go up into a big conference and start talking about this stuff?
Right. It's just like Brian. They'd like to brag. They can't help themselves. Do you want to read that quote from Daniel Sheehan of the Christic Institute?
Where is
I
it?
can do
it.
Okay. So this is Daniel Sheehan. He says, quote, "We've talked to half a dozen individuals who've told a startlingly similar story about how, at a very young age, usually between 20 and 25, they were contacted, usually within the context of military training, and told, look, we've got a special deal for you. You're going to come into the service under the normal designation of being an infantryman, but you're going to leave the service after a while, and you're going to have special training, and you're going to be brought into a special program. They're sent to special places where they're trained by mercenaries, and then they're told, you're going to be called upon from time to time to do some things for us," unquote.
And that is precisely what happened to Timothy McVeigh. That's just precisely what happened. He was given sort of a strange discharge from the military and was kind of laid in wait and given instructions to do certain things. So I don't know if they threw him under the bus or, I don't know if they somehow get these guys out the back door, maybe before they're executed. I have no idea. That's a question I have on that. His execution was very strange.
I heard that too. I remember hearing that. Yeah.
So
didn't he tell his sister? Didn't McVeigh tell his sister that he was part of a secret program?
No, absolutely. Yeah, he was talking. He was talking, even in the 60-minute interview, he kind of gave some hints of things, but he called himself the good soldier. So he thought that he was on a mission and they were going to get him out of prison at some point.
Right. And here's a picture from your website. It includes John Tower, who ties into Promise. He ties into Robert Maxwell. It's pretty incredible. That guy right there. If you see that on YouTube. Anyway, please continue.
I also kind of think they've extended this to there's a breeding ground in California that you probably have come across, Atascadero. Have I pronounced that right?
Atascadero, yeah.
That's a cesspool, especially back in the 60s and 70s, because they would take these really dangerous criminals and just kind of release them. People like William Bonin, Carol Eddie Cole, they would go into Atascadero, go into their little program. They had some strange guys in there too, including one psychiatrist who was a serial killer himself.
Wow, which one was that? Do you remember his name?
Oh,
Daniel DeFries came out of Atascadero, right?
Daniel DeFries came out the one up north. I'm trying to remember the one up by San Francisco. And of course, he got tied into Patty Hearst. And who shows up dealing with Patty Hearst? Our old friend
Jolie.
Brian. Jolie again. Yeah.
Jolie showed up. Yeah. But there was something going on in California during the 60s. Jolyon took a year off and came to Haight-Ashbury. There was the whole guy at Jonestown, Jim Jones, very suspect kind of connections. Symbionese Liberation Army, the Manson family, Jonestown, all that stuff. There were all kinds of crazy, creepy mind control elements.
And a lot of these serial killers and criminals coming out of some of these mental institutions, then they would be quick releases, and they would go out and kill a lot of people within months after they're released. And a lot of times they would release them and says these guys are fine. And one of them, Eddie Cole, constantly tried to get. I mean, I think he ended up killing 20 women. And all along the way, he was constantly trying to turn himself in and trying to go back into a mental hospital. He tried to get caught, and they wouldn't do anything. They just ignored him. Finally shows up in Nevada and gets the last psychiatrist dealing with him and says, "Well, we're just going to buy you a bus ticket back down to San Diego," and then Carol Vine said at that point, went down to San Diego, he just decided not to restrain himself anymore.
Bonin is Bonin. Is that the guy?
Bonin, Bonin. That will mention I think that story will mention the psychiatrist.
Yeah. Ted Kaczynski, there's a comment here from Fire Pixie. Ted Kaczynski was in some kind of mind control program. Whitey Bulger was. A lot of these guys, so many of these people. Bulger was a serial killer who got subjected to kind of like LSD psychic driving tests. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, Netflix even admits that the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, was involved in that program up in Harvard or wherever it was, and they named one of the main hitters in these programs.
Wow.
So that's an admission.
Right. And I think you wrote in one of your articles, like it was a big program. There were like multiple, like 150 sub programs of MK Ultra. So they were tinkering with stuff. And this guy right here, William Harvey, was another one. Just incredible stuff.
I think some of the leaders are into this stuff too. I mean, Justin Trudeau, to me, looks like he's been heavily immersed in mental mapping, sensitivity training. Everything he says and does is vapid and prefabricated. He's just such a phony. And Kamala Harris kind of has that vibe to me too. I don't have the proof. I just have suspicions. Joe Biden seems really mentally whacked, like a puppet.
Yeah. He's not running things. There's no question about
it. There's just something off about him that he might have a handler. There's the celeb community. That's the one that gets a lot of the attention. The right. Hotbed, that's what everybody focuses on because they're so weird. But
I think the celeb community is important to comment on because a lot of the symbolism and a lot of that occult mind control symbolism is suffused through a lot of their culture, their clothing, their movies and stuff. I mean, it's bled over from the secret programs into Hollywood culture.
Well, and plus they're trying to mind control the general population because they've got these triggers that they know, like the Disney and the Wizard of Oz and all these things have been part of the triggering that you probably start getting at the minute you start watching the Wizard of Oz when you're a little kid. But when I grew up in Kansas, it was tornado country, and that would be on every year. I kind of wonder, what did watching that do to me?
Right. Man, it's incredible. The Wizard of Oz is really potent. Yeah. I mean, there's certain books supposedly used for this programming, and Wizard of Oz is one. Catcher in the Rye, all this other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, then they've kind of gone, they have a highly suggestible person could be medicated with a drug cocktail to facilitate a psychic break. So that kind of goes back to you and Cameron. So they must be doing some kind of psychic break at some point. And then you can use drugs like scopolamine, which can induce surrendering of willpower. I personally think that scopolamine might be used in some of these smiley face killing cases or something like that, where you can just, those guys are not going somewhere of their own free will. Something's happening.
Right, I agree.
You got remote signaling can make somebody believe they're hearing the voice of God. Now, the voice of God, people laugh at that because that's the tinfoil hat thing. But I got news for you wags out there. A tinfoil hat does not protect you against the voice of God, voice to skull. And so those are electromagnetic directed energy weapons. The older generation weapons are called masers, and they're continuous waves that are directed at large regions of the body, thermal heating, pins and needles. After rising out of bed, the stomach, bladder, colon, legs are continuously wave masters. And the brain, the entire head and neck are pulsed with electric shock. And they can, since 2016, they have a new device, a laser, an optical laser, and you know the technology is 20 years ahead of what we even imagine.
Definitely, no question.
And so you get insomnia, and so you get the insomnia because the target gets the impression that he's being molested, sodomized, nipples titillated, lasered in the right hip, right knee. Relentless torture tactic, hearing noises all the time. And what's amazing is that CNN did a whole program on this technology back in 1985. You can still find it.
Wow.
CNN's gone a long ways from those days, but that was back in the days when there was actually some attempt to get to the bottom of this. And then one of Jesse Ventura's last shows on conspiracy theory involved people experiencing this microwave technology, including voice to skull. And he was really going down the rabbit hole. Then all of a sudden, that was the last show he ever did. And he's almost been persona non grata ever since. Just boom. That show never got on the air.
Right. Here's your thing. Mass shooting perps have common accounts of feeling mind controlled. Now, one guy, Lochner, I think you mentioned. What's his name? Jared Lochner. Yeah. Wow. That guy looked like he got his brain scrambled.
Well, it's easy because the general public just thinks that they're crazy. So it's very, very easy to cover this stuff up. But there's a whole list of them. Let's see, I have a list of them here.
You have all that list here, yeah. This is your voice of God one. This is where it gets really scary. Like, whoa.
The Sarnoff brothers talk about hearing voices.
One of them was, right? He said he was contacted by the voice of God. I think that was in one of your articles. He literally said it. I mean, then you have an article about Jonestown. Can you talk a little bit about Jonestown?
They just brought in a lot of drugs. Why? Why are you drugging these people so much? Why are you just around the clock? And then 24/7, Jones would be on the intercom preaching and propagandizing and mind controlling these people, brainwashing them, just terrorize them, constant terror, and getting them real fearful. And that's the Stockholm Syndrome, because a lot of those people were trapped down there, and they're really captives, and so they manipulated them into those people didn't drink the Kool-Aid voluntarily.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard rumors that they were all murdered. Yeah, most of them were murdered. They were intentionally covering up the evidence, but they were doing all kinds of stuff. They were intentionally psychically driving them, threatening that he would do like run-throughs before the whole thing, the whole end of it came. Like, today's the day.
Why? He's saying, trust me. Yeah, we'll do a run-through. Go ahead and pop it. I see. We were just playing with you. Didn't really kill you, did it? And so a lot of the people thought, because they were suffering from the Stockholm Syndrome, that if we take it this time, it kind of reminds me of the booster shots for COVID.
Right. Well, dude, you want to talk about mind control? Holy smokes.
Yeah, Jonestown's a beta test. They're just testing the stuff, seeing what they can get away with.
Right, and this guy Dwyer was a CIA asset too, right? Wasn't that?
Right. Yeah, there's
a lot there. There's a lot of stuff about Jonestown that is not right. Wow.
Yeah, Tamerlane Sarnoff said he used the term majestic mind control. So he was specifically referring to voice to skull, or what's called V2K, microwave audio technology, that can project sound to the inner ear to give messages to a targeted individual. So that's fairly recent. That's sort of could be going on. Sirhan, yeah, he repeatedly claimed to have no memory of the shooting of Kennedy. In his testimony before the parole board, he recalled events before the shooting in some detail, such as going to the shooting range, visiting the hotel, in search of a party, returning to the lobby after realizing he drunk too many Tom Collins. He next claimed to have drunk coffee in a backstage area with a polka dot dressed woman to whom he was attracted and who may have been involved with a conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy. And I think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has kind of come around to this theory. He basically accused this Filipino guy,
Shane Eugene Caesar. Thane Eugene Caesar.
Yeah, he's just coming. After Caesar died in the Philippines, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said he did it, not Sirhan.
Right. I think that the Kennedy family, there was a cousin too who thinks that Sirhan should be let out of jail. So, yeah.
They hypnotized him in that one clip. And then what's with all the mass shootings and vehicular attacks? I have a chart showing mass shootings and vehicular attacks against random strangers hardly even occurred before 2013. Why is there an epidemic of that? I can't find any plausible explanation of why there'd be a 20-fold increase in mass shooter and vehicular attack events against random targets. Where did this all come from? Why do they go after low value targets and innocents when the previous eras they were high value ranking targets? It's a huge standard deviation. Yeah, it doesn't combine. And I think a lot of these are hoaxes, but they also are using patsies to set up.
Yeah, there's some guy. Yeah, they've. Somebody I don't really want to mention, but has said that since the 60s and 70s, their capacities to implement these programs have increased in power and strength. Like it's on steroids now. Like it's really bad what they can do now, much more so. Which is in the 60s and 70s, what they could do is bad. So,
well, they have the ability to just take over governments and take over the control of your society. I call them fifth columnists, and I think that's really going on in the United States. They've got these people installed everywhere because there's just, I call it sub-zeros, negative selection. There's so many people that aren't very meritorious or decent people. It's just never ending. Liars, thieves.
Right.
The media is full of them.
Yes.
Where do they come from? Who are these people?
Right. Good question. Very good question. Can you available to take a few questions? Can you talk more about Kaczynski and his kind of mind control? Do you know, anything more in detail? He was at Harvard.
Kaczynski was. You could see the presentation on Netflix. Go to Netflix and watch that part because it covers it pretty clearly. I don't think that was really that was so much of a slide, because it's like, wow, you're in that program, and next thing you know, later in life, you're being triggered by something's sending you off, and you're doing all this stuff. That's how I would describe that. Right. That makes sense.
He was severely traumatized, I think, my understanding of that.
And he was young. Yeah, he was young. He was only like 16. He was a real smart guy, and they put him into Harvard early, and he's trusting. He kind of trusted these guys that were doing the experiment on him, and they broke him. Basically, there's one scene in the Netflix series where they're slaughtering the guy. They're just kind of making him feel like shit.
Yeah, you couldn't win. Like the whole thing was to degrade you. Yeah.
Double bind. Yeah. It's called double bind theory. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Right. That's a method they use on mass brainwashing. The whole society.
Right. So true. Yeah, you're never going to win. It's like I think they're applying those principles through the mass media. Like you're not going to win. So,
Right.
do you know anything about the Kubark counterintelligence interrogation method stuff?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard that name. I've heard of Kubark before, but have you heard? Somebody asked something about Hassan. Let's see. Are you familiar with Steve Hassan? Ask Russ's opinion of Steve Hassan whenever you get the chance. Do you know who Steve Hassan is?
What's he associated with?
I think he is kind of a cult deprogrammer analyst. What does he write? He wrote something about the Trump syndrome or something like that. I forgot. Steve Hassan. He was an ex-Mooney.
He's the guy that deprograms the Moonies. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cult. He rescues people from cults.
That's correct.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to judge the guy one way or another. It's obviously something that needs to be done. Jeez.
Right. Well, I think one of his books is Combating Mind Control, the #1 best-selling guide to protection, rescue, and recovery from destructive cults. And then his most best-selling one was The Cult of Trump. A leading cult expert explains how the president uses mind control.
Yeah, I mean, and QAnon is definitely a mind control operation.
No question. Yeah. No question. Let's see.
My politics tends to lean towards that direction, but I mean, I can recognize the skullduggery.
Oh yeah, no
and that's what people have to get around. You can't. Everybody's kind of caught up on this Hegelian dialectic: left, right, Republican, Democrat. That's how they play you too. That's another one of these double binds, because you think you're really supporting a party when in reality you're supporting the party through this Hegelian dialectic.
Right.
And they all agree. The party agrees on just about every issue. When you really look at it, they agree on just about everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Looting operations, the Federal Reserve, you name it. They have a few what I call wedge issues. And one of the nastier wedge issues that are going on now that is really awful is this identity politics, getting everybody worked up over that. That's really evil stuff.
So this Beth is asking, what kind of defenses can you take to avoid this, like microwave and these type of things? Do you know anything about that, Russ?
I have no idea. I think if they target you, your history. The main thing to do is wean yourself from mainstream media, because that's where the attack is, and a lot of the entertainment is attack. And I got to tell you, I'm 70 now. And I was pretty much what I would call a pajama person until I was 62. I was curious about things. I wasn't an easy person to fool, but I didn't have a clue. When I came to Prague 8 years ago, I weaned myself off of this stuff. And man, oh man, did that change me. And I had a huge wake up about what was going on. I became awoken, and I became curious and started looking into things a lot more. And a lot of it had to do with just getting out of the United States and getting away from the trash that's being given to you every day, even the advertising.
Oh, it's all mind control. Look at how many pharmaceutical companies support Fox News or some of these other.
That's blatant.
What's that? That was blatant. Yeah, it's off the charts. You're basically being hammered with, 20 minutes out of the hour is pharmaceutical ads. It's crazy.
That's what 99% of the people listening are going to be subjected to. You're not going to be probably targeted by this other stuff. It's mostly the what I call Stockholm Syndrome, fear porn, kind of terrorizing, storytelling.
And I think you have to just not be naive. A lot of these people who became victims of this mind control, people at People's Temple or some of these other groups, there were people who avoided the Symbionese Liberation Army because they weren't naive. They were like, something's wrong here. Where did this guy come from? Why did he pop out of jail? How is he, getting financed? And those people survived. They didn't end up in jail or dead. So,
but most of those people in Jonestown were in almost a hopeless situation, and they can do that to everybody. I mean, what if they had a blackout in the middle of a storm?
Right.
I'm kind of worried
And
about that here in Europe because there's just, there's not enough gas coming in. There's energy shortages and they're going to run out. They're just going to run out. And then you got countries like France are closing down their nuclear plants in Germany. It's almost like there's some kind of a fifth column making these awful decisions. Oh, we got to get off of carbon. Okay, well, meanwhile, what happens when the whole country, we get a blackout, lose all our power in the middle of winter, and then everybody's going to be helpless and hopeless, and then you've got a Jonestown scenario.
right. And it's interesting. You just said the hopelessness and helplessness. I'm positive that Jolly and West knew how to create that state of helplessness, hopelessness, dread. So they would definitely do things to people. That was it. I can answer this question, SC, but I just did a study, and I'll try to put an article together of what happened at this whole Astro World concert. That was I can't remember the guys. Travis something.
Travis Scott.
Yeah, that thing was full of mind control. Wow, off the charts. They had like a circle in the center that looks like one of your articles. They had all kinds of weird noises. Yeah. It was really off this chart. So you got to watch out with some.
There seemed to be some people being jabbed with something. There was, and Thomas Scott didn't give a damn.
Yeah,
he didn't give a damn. He just takes off and goes to an after party afterwards, totally unaware.
Yeah, he went to Dave and Buster's and partied. Had a good time with Drake. 10 people died. There were tons of people injured. There were like 300 people injured.
And isn't it curious that he's connected with the Kardashians?
It's too much. They know a lot. The Kardashians, I've seen them make those kind of occult hand signals and stuff. They know. They're Hollywood, man. They're Hollywood royalty. They know all this stuff.
There's a guy that put up a 5-hour video on YouTube that people should probably watch, or at least watch an hour or two of it, that goes through all these Illuminati Freemason hand signals, and you can't believe all people using it. It's like, really, you're all using that same hand signal. So that's your mind controlled minions. That's probably a qualification.
It's a network, and a lot of these guys have known this stuff, and a lot of the politicians know it too. So something that's just another component of this kind of new era we're entering into that people have to be conscious of, cognizant of.
But you think it's really occult related, don't you?
I think in part. I mean, I think it is a skill, but it's definitely occulted. I wouldn't say necessarily that everybody involved in this is like an occultist, although I think it was Esther Books who's like a 32nd degree Mason, right? Something like that. But the knowledge of this technique is definitely occulted. It wouldn't have its power if people knew that this could end up. Then people wouldn't trust some of these freaking shrinks. You wouldn't trust them at all.
Well, see, part of the power of what they do is I call it cartoon world. They get everybody believing in cartoon world.
Yeah.
And so you evaluate something like 3 buildings going down, 2 planes hit the World Trade Center, and 3 buildings go down. Well, the problem is that if you accept that, you're kind of going into cartoon world.
Yeah, that's true.
And then they got you. And if you don't accept it, then you're ostracized. So you have a double bind.
Yeah.
And most people would rather not accept it, and then they got you. And so the idea is to continually lie to you and present you these little scenarios that make no sense, that don't add up, that don't combine. And if you look at them and you accept them as real, that's black magic.
I think that's a good way to end it. Where's the best place for people to see your stuff, see your material?
It's winterwatch.net, articles about every day. And there's other podcasts. I've done over 100 podcasts. If you want to listen to some more. And thanks for having me on. I've always been a big fan of yours.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, thanks for.
I'm glad we got the audio working, so that's good too.
Yeah, so I mean, once you kind of figure out StreamYard, it becomes easier. But you can do a lot more stuff on StreamYard where we could reference your articles and things like that. That and other places. So and if people want to reach out to you, there's a contact information at winterwatch.net, correct?
Correct. Contact, and there's also comments in the articles. You can join in there as well.
Right, so people can interact with that. Again, thank you so much for your time. It's Russ Winter of winterwatch.net. We covered a lot of mind control stuff. So thanks so much for your time. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye, William. Bye-bye.
Stay there.